They came from the stars believing we were primitives. They saw our wooden ships crossing oceans and thought us backward. They witnessed our steam engines and called us children playing with fire. The Krythian Empire had conquered 200 worlds, and Earth was supposed to be conquest number 201. A footnote in their history, a minor cleanup operation before moving on to richer targets in the galactic core. They were wrong. Catastrophically, apocalyptically wrong. This is the story of humanity's final retaliation, and how the hunters became the hunted. Commander Zethris stood on the bridge of the Imperial warship Sovereign Dawn, gazing down at the blue marble suspended in the darkness below. The third planet from its yellow star was unremarkable by galactic standards. Abundant water, a single large moon. Primitive electromagnetic communications scattered across its surface, like the neural sparks of a barely conscious organism. Initial scans complete. Commander reported his tactical officer, her crystalline carapace gleaming under the bridge's violet illumination. The dominant species is carbon-based, bipedal, approximately 2 meters in height. Technology level is pre-fusion. They're still burning hydrocarbons for energy. I'm detecting nuclear fission capabilities, but nothing that poses a threat to our shields. Zethris allowed himself a small gesture of satisfaction, his 3-fingered hand tapping rhythmically against the command throne. 200 worlds, 200 victories for the Krythian Empire. This would be the easiest yet. Population? He asked. Approximately 8 billion individuals scattered across 7 major landmasses. They're divided into numerous tribal factions. Over 190 separate governance structures, many of them in active conflict with each other. Perfect. A divided enemy was a defeated enemy. The Krythian doctrine was simple and had proven effective for 3,000 years. Identify the strongest faction, eliminate their leadership, and the rest would fall into line. These humans would be no different. They would serve the Empire, their world would be stripped of its resources, and the fleet would move on. Standard procedure, identify their primary military powers, Zethris commanded. We'll demonstrate our superiority with a surgical strike. Once they understand resistance is futile, they'll surrender. They always do. What Commander Zethris didn't know, what none of the Krythians could have known, was that humanity had been expecting them. Not them specifically, but someone, something. We had been watching the skies for over a century, listening to the cosmic silence with growing hope and dread. We had wondered if we were alone in the universe. Now we had our answer, and we were absolutely terrified. General Sarah Chen stood in the crisis room deep beneath the Swiss Alps, surrounded by screens showing every major capital on Earth. The room hummed with controlled chaos. Translators worked frantically, diplomats shouted into secure lines, and military advisors pored over tactical displays that showed something impossible hovering in high orbit. Madam Secretary General. Chen addressed the elderly woman on the central screen, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The object is confirmed. 17 kilometers long, composition unknown, technology far beyond anything we possess. And it's not alone. We've detected at least 40 smaller craft and formation around it. The Secretary General of the United Nations looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. Military assessment, General. Chen glanced at the display showing the alien vessel. Even from thousands of kilometers away, its power was evident. Sleek, predatory, covered in what appeared to be weapon emplacements. If they're hostile, we can't stop them. Not with conventional weapons. Our most optimistic scenarios give us maybe 72 hours of resistance before complete subjugation, and our most pessimistic scenarios, 72 minutes. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment. Someone coughed. A phone rang and was quickly silenced. However, Chen continued, and every eye in the room turned to her. We do have options. Extreme options. Options we swore we'd never use again after 1945. She pulled up a classified file, her security clearance barely sufficient to access it. Project Damocles, humanity's final insurance policy. The thing we'd built in secret over 70 years, scattered across 12 countries, hidden in mountain ranges and ocean trenches and desert wastes. Thousands of warheads, each one capable of turning a city into radioactive ash. We'd built them to threaten each other, to maintain the balance of terror that had prevented another world war. Now they might be our only hope against an enemy from the stars, the nuclear option, said the Russian ambassador, his face grim. You're suggesting we attack them with our entire arsenal. Not attack, Chen corrected. Deter, we send them a message they can understand. We show them that conquering Earth won't be the easy victory they're expecting. We demonstrate that we're willing to burn our own world to ash rather than submit to slavery. That's insane, breathed the Chinese representative. That's human, Chen replied. We've done it before. We'll do it again. The Secretary General closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they held the weight of 8 billion souls. If they make any hostile move, any attack on any nation, you have authorization to proceed with Damocles. God help us all. Commander Zethris had identified his target. The nation calling itself the United States of America appeared to be the dominant military power. Their capital city, a place called Washington, housed their primary leadership. A single demonstration strike would decapitate their command structure and force immediate surrender. Helm, position us over their capital. Weapons, prepare a precision strike. 50 megaton yield, targeted at their primary government complex. We'll vaporize their leaders and broadcast the footage across their entire planet. They'll understand their place in the universal order. The Sovereign Dawn moved silently through the upper atmosphere, its shields deflecting the thin wisps of air. Below, Zethris could see the lights of the human city spreading like a glowing web across the landscape. So many of them, packed so densely. Did they even understand how vulnerable they were? Target locked. Commander, fire. A lance of crimson energy stabbed down from the heavens, moving at nearly the speed of light. It struck the white-domed building at the coordinates with perfect precision. For a microsecond, the temperature at the impact point reached 10 million degrees. Stone, steel, and flesh vaporized instantly. A crater half a kilometer wide appeared where the center of human government had stood for over 2 centuries. The shockwave shattered windows 50 kilometers away. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out power grids across 3 states. And for 1,000 human beings, from the president to the janitors, from senators to security guards, simply ceased to exist. Zethris watched the mushroom cloud rise and nodded with satisfaction. Broadcast this to all their communication networks. Tell them to surrender or face total annihilation. Tell them the Krythian Empire offers them a choice, serve or die. But even as his communications officer opened channels to deliver the ultimatum, something was happening across Earth, something the Krythians hadn't anticipated. Humanity wasn't surrendering. We were getting angry dot-in bunkers beneath Colorado, in silos scattered across the Russian steppes, in submarines prowling the ocean depths, in mobile launchers hidden in forests and mountains across 12 nations. The same message arrived simultaneously. Damocles authorized, weapons free. General Chen stood in the command center, watching as status lights turned from red to green across the massive display board. Every nuclear weapon on Earth, every last instrument of human self-destructs, was now aimed at a single target. Ma'am, said her tactical officer, a young lieutenant who looked like he might throw up. We're looking at full deployment. 14,000 warheads. The electromagnetic pulse alone will destroy most of our satellite infrastructure. The radiation will contaminate the upper atmosphere for decades. Even if we win, the environmental damage will be catastrophic. And if we lose, Chen replied quietly, we'll be slaves mining our own planet for their empire. Launch across the planet. Missiles erupted from their silos. Submarine hatches opened. And weapons that had lurked in silence for decades finally fulfilled their terrible purpose. Not aimed at Moscow or Beijing or Washington, but at the sky itself. At the arrogant aliens who thought humanity was just another primitive species to be conquered. From the bridge of the Sovereign Dawn, the sight must have been magnificent and terrifying. Thousands of white contrails rising from the planet below, each one carrying a primitive but devastating weapon. Zethris stared in disbelief. What is this? What are they doing? Commander, they're launching nuclear weapons. Thousands of them, all targeted on our position. Impossible, Zethris breathed. No primitive species has ever. They'll contaminate their own planet. The fallout will poison their atmosphere for generations. But the missiles kept coming, wave after wave. Humanity's entire arsenal thrown into a single desperate gambit. We weren't trying to defeat them with technology. We couldn't match their energy weapons or their shields or their faster-than-light drives. We were doing something much more human. We were dragging them down to our level and beating them with experience. Shields to maximum. Evasive maneuvers, Zethris ordered, but there were too many. Far too many. The first nuclear warheads detonated. Against the Sovereign Dawn's shields and blossoms of atomic fire. The shields held. The second wave hit. Then the third. Then the fourth. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Shields at 80%, 70%. They're coordinating the strikes to hit the same points. How do they know where to target? They knew because humanity had been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We'd been killing each other with increasing efficiency. Since we'd discovered that rocks could break bones and fire could burn flesh. We'd studied warfare like other species studied art. We'd made it a science, a philosophy, a way of life. And now we turned all that accumulated knowledge of death toward the stars. The Sovereign Dawn tried to flee, to escape back to high orbit, but the missiles followed. Hunter-killer satellites that had been disguised as space debris activated, adding their payloads to the assault. The shields flickered, failed, and nuclear fire washed across the hull of a starship that had conquered 200 worlds. General Chen watched the tactical display. As the massive alien vessel began to burn, parts of it broke away, trailing atmosphere and debris. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull. It was dying, but she felt no triumph, only grim determination. Open a channel, she ordered. Broadcast this on all frequencies. If they can receive it, they need to hear it. The communications officer nodded, and Chen began to speak. Her words were translated by every system humanity possessed. Sent out on radio waves and laser communications, and even old-fashioned Morse code, just in case. To the Krythian Empire, you came to our world believing we were primitives. You thought we would submit to your rule because you possessed superior technology. You believed that might makes right, and that your power gave you the authority to enslave 8 billion human beings. You were wrong. We are humanity. We have fought wars that consumed entire continents. We have created weapons capable of destroying our own planet. We have clawed our way from caves to cities to the stars through blood and fire and stubborn, stupid refusal to ever give up. You killed for thousands of us today. You destroyed our capital. You think this will make us surrender. It will make us remember. Leave our system now. Leave and never return. Tell your empire that Earth is not worth the cost. Tell them that humans would rather burn their own world than live as slaves. Tell them that we're not worth conquering because we will never, ever stop fighting back. Or stay and learn firsthand why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Sovereign Dawn didn't respond. It couldn't. Its communications ray was slag. Its bridge opened to vacuum, and Commander Zethris was among the thousands of Krythian dead floating in orbit above a planet that had just announced its presence to the galaxy. In the most violent way possible, the smaller Krythian vessels fled. They jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished into the cosmic dark, carrying with them news that would shake the Empire to its foundations. Earth had fought back. Earth had won. But in the command center beneath the Swiss Alps, General Chen wasn't celebrating. She was looking at the casualty reports, the radiation monitors, the long-term environmental projections. We paid for this victory, she said quietly to the Secretary General, whose face on the screen looked older than ancient stone. The EMP took out half our infrastructure. The radiation from all those detonations will increase cancer rates for a generation. And we just announced to the entire galaxy that we're violent, dangerous, and armed with nuclear weapons. Do you regret it? Asked the Secretary General. Chen thought about that, about the 4,000 dead in Washington, about the price they'd paid to remain free, about the terrible weapons they'd unleashed and the precedent they'd set. No, she finally said, we're alive and we're free. That's worth any price, even if the Krythians come back with a bigger fleet. Chen smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a species that had climbed to the top of its planet's food chain and wasn't about to give up that position to anyone, no matter how advanced their technology. Then we'll kill them again, she said simply. We're very good at killing. The debris from the Battle of Earth, as it was already being called in history books that were still being written, formed a glittering ring in high orbit. Pieces of the Sovereign Dawn mixed with fragments of destroyed missiles and satellites. Already, salvage operations were underway. Human engineers were studying Krythian technology, reverse engineering their shields, their weapons, their faster-than-light drives. We were adapting. We were learning. We were evolving, just as we'd always done when faced with a superior predator. In laboratories around the world, the race was on. If the Krythians came back, we needed to be ready with more than just nuclear weapons. We needed their technology. Turned against them, we needed to become what we'd always been, the species that looked at any tool, any weapon, any piece of technology and asked, how can I use this to survive? But something else was happening. Something even more significant than the technological revolution beginning to sweep across Earth. The nations that had spent centuries fighting each other were working together. The nuclear arsenals that had been aimed at each other for generations were being unified into a planetary defense system. The United Nations, long considered a toothless bureaucracy, was being reformed into something with real power, a global government capable of defending Earth against threats from beyond. Humanity was uniting, not out of idealism or philosophical agreement, but out of pure pragmatic necessity. We'd faced our first contact with an alien species, and it had nearly killed us. We wouldn't make the same mistake twice. General Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Space Defense Platform Alpha, looking down at the blue planet below. Somewhere down there, in a mass grave outside Washington, D.C., 4,000 bodies were being laid to rest. Heroes, the politicians called them. Martyrs who'd died to wake humanity up to the reality of a hostile universe. Ma'am, her aide approached carefully. We're receiving a transmission, long range. It's from deep space. The Krythians? Chen felt her heart rate spike. No, ma'am, it's someone else, another species. They're requesting permission to approach Earth. They say they're representatives of the Galactic Coalition, and they want to talk about what happened here 3 months ago. Chen stared out at the stars, suddenly aware that humanity's story was only just beginning. We'd passed our first test. We'd proven that Earth wouldn't go quietly into the darkness. We'd shown the galaxy that humans could fight back. But now we'd attracted attention. The galaxy had noticed us, and they were coming to investigate. Tell them they're welcome to approach, Chen said finally. But make sure every weapons platform we have is tracking them. And if they make any hostile move, yes, ma'am, we'll light them up like the 4th of July. Chen smiled. 3 months ago, she'd been afraid of the dark between the stars. Now she was ready to face it. Humanity was ready. We'd tasted our own blood, and instead of fear, we'd found something else. Determination. The coalition ship entered Earth's solar system with all the caution of someone approaching a wounded predator. It was smaller than the Sovereign Dawn had been, sleeker, and it broadcast peaceful intentions on every frequency imaginable. It carried no weapons. Its shields were minimal, and it approached slowly, giving Earth's defense systems plenty of time to track it. Ambassador Keleth stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel, studying the planet below with all 4 of his eyes. A human would have described him as insectoid, with an elongated carapace and mandibles that clicked when he spoke. But Keleth was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species, and he had served the Galactic Coalition for 300 years. He'd seen first contact scenarios play out dozens of times. He'd never seen one like this. Status of their weapons systems, he asked his pilot, tracking us with everything they have. Ambassador, missile silos are open. Their orbital platforms are locked on our position. If we make any aggressive move, they'll reduce us to constituent atoms in approximately 5 seconds. Good, Keleth said. Surprising his crew. That means they're taking this seriously. That means they're survivors, not victims. The Coalition had been monitoring Earth for decades, watching humanity's development with interest. They'd been preparing to make contact when Earth achieved stable fusion power, probably within another century. It was standard procedure. Wait until a species matured enough to understand its place in the galactic community. then extend an invitation to join. The Krythian invasion had changed everything. "I want complete transparency," Keleth ordered. "Show them our crew complement, our ship specifications, our diplomatic credentials, everything that proves we're not a threat, and get me a communication channel to their leadership." General Chen stood in the reconstructed situation room, watching the alien ambassador's face on the screen. Keleth was trying to smile, though his mandibles made it look more like a grimace. She appreciated the effort. "General Chen," Keleth began, his voice translated by a device that made him sound oddly British. "On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I wish to formally apologize for what happened to your world. The Krythian Empire has been a threat to free species for millennia, but we never imagined they would target a pre-contact civilization. Your response was unprecedented." "Effective," Chen corrected. "The word you're looking for is effective." Keleth's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Indeed, you're the first species to successfully repel a Krythian invasion fleet. Most simply surrender. Those that resist are usually destroyed. But you destroyed them instead. And you did it with primitive nuclear weapons and sheer, bloody-minded determination. Is there a point to this conversation, Ambassador? Because if you're here to tell us we can't defend ourselves, we're going to have a problem." No, Keleth said quickly. "Quite the opposite. I'm here to offer Earth membership in the Coalition. We're an alliance of free species who believe in mutual defense and cooperation. We share technology. We protect each other from threats like the Krythians, and we'd very much like humanity to join us." Chen glanced at the Secretary General, who nodded slightly. "Why?" Chen asked bluntly. "We're primitive by your standards. We nearly destroyed our own planet fighting off one ship. What could we possibly offer the Coalition?" Keleth was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was serious. "Because you're warriors, General Chen, true warriors. Most species in the galaxy have forgotten what that means. We've had peace for so long that we've grown soft. The Krythians prey on that softness. But humanity? You've been fighting for survival since you climbed down from the trees. You've made war into an art form. You've created weapons that horrify us and tactics that we never would have considered. The galaxy needs that. Needs you. Because the Krythians won't stop. They'll rebuild their fleet and come back. And when they do, we need humanity standing with us, teaching us how to fight back." Chen was about to respond when every alarm in the situation room began screaming simultaneously. Red lights flashed, tactical displays went haywire, and her communications officer's face went white. "General, multiple contacts, hundreds of them, dropping out of FTL at the edge of the solar system." The main screen switched to show the tactical display. Chen felt her blood turn to ice. Ships, hundreds of them, all broadcasting the same identifying signature, Krythian Empire. But these weren't exploratory vessels or scout ships. These were warships, dreadnoughts, carriers, an entire battle fleet, probably 1/10 of the Empire's total military might, all jumping into Earth's solar system with obvious hostile intent. They'd come back, and they'd brought overwhelming force. Ambassador Keleth stared at the display, his eyes wide with shock. "That's impossible. They've never responded this quickly, never committed this many resources to a single planet. What did you do to make them this angry?" Chen looked at the fleet, calculating in her head. Even with everything Earth had built in 3 months, even with the Coalition's help, they couldn't stop this. The nuclear option wouldn't work twice. The Krythians would be expecting it, prepared for it. They'd bombard Earth from beyond the range of human weapons, reducing the planet to radioactive glass without ever risking another ship. Humanity had won the battle, but we were about to lose the war, unless, Ambassador, Chen said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. An insane, desperate, typically human idea. How many ships does the Coalition have in this sector? How fast can they get here? Not fast enough, Keleth said grimly. And not enough ships. That's a Krythian revenge fleet. They're going to make an example of Earth. They're going to show the galaxy what happens to species that resist. Chen smiled. And once again, it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a species that had been backed into a corner and decided that, if they were going to die, they'd take their enemies with them. Then we don't fight them in space. She said, "We can't win in space, so we make them come down to us. We make them land. We draw them into the one arena where humans have never lost." "What arena is that?" Keleth asked. Chen's smile grew wider. "Hungrier, more dangerous, our home ground. We make them try to actually conquer Earth, city by city, street by street, house by house. We turn our entire planet into a fortress, and we show the Krythian Empire why humans are the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." On the screens, the Krythian fleet began moving toward Earth, hundreds of warships gleaming like deadly stars against the cosmic dark. They came seeking revenge. They came seeking to make an example. They came believing that overwhelming force would finally break humanity's will to resist. They were about to learn the hardest lesson in the galaxy: never, ever underestimate a human being fighting for their home. The Krythian revenge fleet hung at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of metallic locusts, hundreds of warships ready to reduce humanity to ash and memory. General Sarah Chen stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by the leaders of every nation on Earth, and proposed the most audacious plan in human history. Not to fight the Krythians in space where they held every advantage, but to lure them down to Earth itself, to turn our entire planet into a killing field and show these galactic conquerors what humans had perfected over 10,000 years of endless warfare. Ambassador Keleth stared at Chen as if she'd lost her mind. His mandibles clicked nervously, a gesture his species made when confronted with something incomprehensible. "General, you're suggesting intentionally allowing a Krythian ground invasion? Do you understand what that means? They'll land troops in every major population center. They'll have orbital support. Their individual soldiers are stronger, faster, and better armed than any human. It will be a massacre." Chen pulled up a holographic display of Earth, rotating slowly in the center of the room. Red dots began appearing across every continent, thousands of them, highlighting defensive positions that had been prepared over the past 3 months. "Ambassador, let me tell you about human history, about a place called Stalingrad, where my Russian colleagues' ancestors turned an entire city into a meat grinder that destroyed the most powerful army in Europe. About Vietnam, where farmers with rifles defeated the most technologically advanced military on the planet. About Afghanistan, where every empire that tried to conquer it broke themselves against the mountains." She zoomed in on New York City, showing the massive defensive preparations, every building rigged with explosives, every subway tunnel converted into a bunker, every bridge wired to collapse at a moment's notice. "Humans don't lose on our home ground, Ambassador. We know every street, every building, every hiding place. We know how to fight dirty, how to ambush, how to make every meter of ground cost our enemies blood. The Krythians think they're coming here to punish us. What they're actually doing is walking into the biggest trap in galactic history." The Russian premier leaned forward, his weathered face grim. "We will make them pay for every city, every block, every building. We have armed our entire population. 300 million guns in America alone. Another 200 million across Europe and Asia. We have 8 billion people, General Chen, and every single one of them now understands what's at stake. The Krythians can have Earth, after they pry it from our cold, dead fingers." The Chinese president nodded. "We have mobilized our entire industrial capacity. Every factory is producing weapons. Every able-bodied citizen is training for combat. We learned from the first invasion. We will not be caught unprepared again." Ambassador Keleth looked around the room at these humans, seeing in their eyes something that made him deeply uncomfortable. These weren't diplomats anymore. They weren't politicians. They were all soldiers now, every one of them, transformed by the reality of existential threat into something harder and more dangerous than anything he'd encountered in 300 years of diplomatic service. "You're actually serious about this," he said slowly. "You're going to let them land. You're going to fight them in your cities, with your civilians in the crossfire. The casualties will be in the hundreds of millions. The casualties will be worth it." Chen replied coldly, "If we remain free. Besides, Ambassador, we won't be fighting alone. You said the coalition wants humanity as members. Well, here's our membership application. Call your fleet. Tell them to get here as fast as they can, because we're going to keep the Krythians busy on the ground while you hit them from orbit." We'll be the hammer, you'll be the anvil, and the Krythian Empire will be caught between us." Keleth hesitated. What Chen was proposing violated every protocol of civilized warfare. It was brutal, ruthless, and would result in unimaginable suffering. It was also, he realized with growing horror and admiration, probably the only strategy that had any chance of working. "I'll make the call," he said finally. "But understand this, General Chen. What you're proposing will change humanity forever. Your species will earn a reputation in the galaxy. They'll call you the Warbringers, the Death Dealers, the species that turned their own world into a battlefield and somehow emerged victorious. Are you prepared for that?" Chen looked at the holographic Earth, spinning peacefully despite the doom approaching from the stars. She thought about her daughter, safe in a bunker beneath the Rockies. She thought about the 4,000 dead in Washington. She thought about every human being who'd ever lived and died on this blue marble, and all the ones who deserved the chance to do the same in the future. "We've been preparing for this moment since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there," she said quietly. "Now we know, and we're ready. Make the call, Ambassador. Tell the coalition to hurry, because the Krythians are about to learn why you don't invade a death world full of apex predators who've been fighting each other for practice." High Admiral Vorn stood aboard the Super Dreadnought Retribution's hammer, studying tactical displays with cold fury. The destruction of the Sovereign Dawn had been a humiliation the Empire could not tolerate. These humans, these primitive apes barely capable of leaving their own atmosphere, had destroyed a Krythian warship. They'd killed Commander Zethris, a hero of 50 campaigns. They'd broadcasted their defiance across the galaxy for all to hear. The Empire's response had been swift and overwhelming. Vorn had been given command of the largest revenge fleet ever assembled for a single world. 200 warships, 5 million soldiers, enough firepower to sterilize the planet 3 times over. "Status report," Vorn demanded, his scaled fist clenching the command throne. "We've completed our approach." "High Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "the human homeworld is within range. We're detecting their defense platforms, but nothing that poses a significant threat. Their nuclear arsenals are ready, but we've adjusted our shield frequencies to specifically counter atomic weapons. They can't hurt us the way they hurt the Sovereign Dawn." "And their communications?" "Still broadcasting defiance, sir. They're not even attempting to negotiate. It's unusual. Most species at this point would be begging for mercy." Vorn's lips pulled back in a predatory smile. "Good, let them be defiant. Let them resist. It will make their subjugation all the sweeter. I want every major city identified. We'll demonstrate our power by destroying one completely. Then offer them a choice, unconditional surrender or total annihilation." "Which city, sir?" Vorn studied the planet below, his eyes settling on a large metropolitan area on the eastern seaboard of the primary landmass. "There, that sprawling complex. What do the humans call it?" "New York City, High Admiral. Population approximately 20 million. Perfect. A large enough target to make our point. Prepare bombardment protocols. I want that city reduced to ash. We'll show these humans what happens to species that defy the Empire." But even as Vorn gave his orders, something was happening on Earth that his sensors couldn't quite capture. The humans weren't evacuating their cities. They were doing the opposite. Military forces were pouring into urban areas. Civilians were being armed and organized into militias. Defensive positions were being fortified. Supplies were being stockpiled in underground bunkers. Earth wasn't preparing to surrender. Earth was preparing for the longest, bloodiest urban warfare campaign in galactic history. And the Krythians, confident in their technological superiority, were walking straight into it. The bombardment of New York City began at dawn, painting the sky with streaks of crimson energy. Krythian warships opened fire from high orbit, their plasma weapons designed to vaporize buildings and shatter infrastructure. The first strikes hit the financial district, towers of steel and glass exploding into fragments. The second wave targeted the bridges, cutting Manhattan off from the mainland. The third wave hit power stations, water treatment facilities, communications hubs. In 90 seconds, the Krythians reduced New York's civilian infrastructure to rubble. They'd done this to 200 worlds before. The bombardment was followed by shock troops landing in drop pods. Elite Krythian warriors equipped with plasma rifles and personal shields, ready to mop up any surviving resistance and establish Imperial control. What they found waiting for them was hell itself. Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez crouched in the rubble of what had been a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan, watching through his rifle scope as the first Krythian drop pods slammed into Times Square. The aliens emerged with military precision, tall figures in powered armor moving in perfect formation. They looked invincible. They looked unstoppable. Rodriguez smiled. They looked like targets. "Hold," he whispered into his radio, knowing that 5,000 other soldiers scattered throughout the ruins were hearing the same command. Wait for it. Wait for them to commit. Wait until they're in the kill zone. The Krythians advanced into the city, their sensors detecting heat signatures and movement in the rubble. They'd been trained for urban warfare. They knew how to clear buildings and eliminate resistance. What they didn't know was that every building around them had been rigged with explosives. Every pile of rubble concealed a firing position. Every subway entrance led to a tunnel network where humans could move unseen. Now, Rodriguez said calmly, "The city exploded. Not with alien plasma weapons, but with good old-fashioned human explosives." Buildings collapsed onto Krythian positions. Roads erupted with buried mines. And from every window, every rooftop, every pile of debris, humans opened fire with everything they had. The Krythians' personal shields stopped the first bullets, and the second, but not the 100th, not the 1,000th. Human tactics didn't rely on single shots. We'd learned over centuries of warfare that enough bullets would overwhelm any defense. We'd learned to concentrate fire, to coordinate our attacks, to bring overwhelming force against single points. The first Krythian fell, his shield overloaded, armor pierced by sustained automatic weapons fire. Then another, then 10 more. The perfect military formation dissolved into chaos as the aliens scrambled for cover, their training suddenly useless in an environment where the enemy was everywhere and nowhere, where every piece of rubble might hide a human with a rifle. Rodriguez reloaded his weapon, watching as a Krythian warrior tried to take cover behind an overturned vehicle. Amateur mistake. He'd been fighting in urban environments for 15 years, since the wars in the Middle East. He knew every trick, every tactic. He aimed carefully and put 3 rounds through the gap between the vehicle and the ground, hitting the Krythian in the leg joint where his armor was weakest. The alien went down, roaring in pain, and immediately became bait. 2 more Krythians rushed to help their fallen comrade, and Rodriguez's entire squad opened fire simultaneously. Concentrate force, overwhelm defenses. It was the same tactic that had worked against every enemy humanity had ever faced, from Roman legions to Nazi tanks to alien invaders from the stars. Fall back, Rodriguez ordered. Section 2, collapse the tunnel entrance. Section 3, prepare the next ambush point. Let them think they're winning. Let them chase us deeper into the city. The humans melted away into the ruins like ghosts, leaving behind dead Krythians and a lot of expensive alien equipment that would be salvaged and reverse-engineered later. The aliens called for reinforcements. More drop pods fell. More troops poured into the city. They were doing exactly what Chen had predicted. They were committing forces to take the city block by block. They were getting drawn into exactly the kind of grinding, close-quarters urban combat where human experience and knowledge of the terrain mattered more than technological superiority. High Admiral Vorn watched from orbit, growing increasingly frustrated. Taking New York should have been a matter of hours. His forces had the city surrounded. They had orbital support. They had every advantage. So why were casualty reports coming in by the hundreds? Why were his troops reporting that the humans were fighting with suicidal determination? Why was every building a fortress and every street a killing field? Send in the second wave, Vorn ordered. Commit more troops. I want that city taken by nightfall. He was making the same mistake every conqueror had made when facing humans on their home ground. He was escalating. He was committing more resources to a fight he couldn't afford to lose. He was falling into the trap. And all across Earth, in London and Moscow, in Beijing and Delhi, in Lagos and Sao Paulo, the same scenario was playing out. Krythian troops landing. Human defenders turning cities into war zones. The aliens discovering that conquering Earth wasn't going to be the easy victory they'd expected. Ambassador Keleth stood on the bridge of the Coalition battlecruiser Harmonious Dawn, watching the tactical display with growing amazement. The Krythian fleet was dispersed across Earth orbit, ships positioned over every major population center to provide fire support for ground forces. It was textbook invasion doctrine. It was also, Keleth realized, a massive tactical mistake. They've scattered their forces, observed the ship's captain, a veteran warrior from a species that looked like bipedal wolves. They're trying to conquer the entire planet simultaneously instead of concentrating their power. The humans are forcing them to, Keleth said, understanding dawning. Every city is resisting. Every population center is a battlefield. The Krythians can't ignore any of them, because that would mean admitting defeat. So they're spreading their fleet thin to support ground operations across the entire planet, which makes them vulnerable to a concentrated counterattack, the captain said, teeth baring in a savage grin. I'm beginning to understand why you wanted us to rush here, Ambassador. The humans aren't just fighting. They're conducting a strategic campaign. They're using their whole planet as bait to draw the Krythians into an impossible situation. The Coalition fleet had arrived with 60 warships, including vessels from a dozen different species. It wasn't enough to match the Krythians in a straight fight, but it didn't need to be, because the Krythians weren't concentrated. They were spread out, trying to conquer a planet that refused to be conquered. Target the ships providing fire support over the human cities, Keleth ordered. Hit them hard and fast. Give the humans some breathing room on the ground. Show the Krythians what it feels like to fight on two fronts simultaneously. The Coalition fleet struck like a hammer, jumping into Earth orbit with weapons blazing. Krythian ships, caught by surprise while focused on ground support operations, found themselves under attack from an unexpected direction. Shield systems designed to deflect bombardment from below suddenly had to reorient to defend against threats from above. The Battle of Earth orbit erupted in full fury. Coalition vessels darted between Krythian dreadnoughts, using superior maneuverability to compensate for inferior firepower. Energy beams crisscrossed the darkness. Ships exploded in silent fury, and on the ground below, human defenders saw alien vessels burning in the sky and knew they weren't alone anymore. High Admiral Vorn roared in fury as his tactical situation collapsed around him. He'd been so focused on punishing the humans that he'd left his fleet vulnerable to outside attack. Now he faced a nightmare scenario, fighting the Coalition in orbit, while his ground forces were bogged down in brutal urban warfare below. Recall all ships to defensive formation, he ordered. We need to consolidate our forces and destroy the Coalition fleet first, sir. If we withdraw orbital support, our ground forces will be vulnerable. The humans will. I don't care what the humans will do. Vorn screamed. We need to eliminate the Coalition threat before we can finish the invasion. All ships, break off ground support and engage the Coalition fleet. It was the second fatal mistake, because the moment the Krythian ships pulled back their fire support, the human defenders went on the offensive. In New York, Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the tunnels with his squad, watching as the Krythian warship that had been hammering their positions pulled away to engage Coalition vessels. The alien ground forces, suddenly without air support, looked vulnerable for the first time. All units, this is command, crackled over the radio. The Krythians have pulled their orbital assets. This is our chance. Execute Operation Hornet's Nest. I repeat, execute Hornet's Nest. Make them regret landing on our planet. Rodriguez grinned fiercely. Hornet's Nest was the contingency plan for this exact situation. Fall back, let the aliens commit forces. Then hit them from every direction when they were vulnerable. You heard the man. He told his squad. Time to show these alien bastards what the United States Army is really capable of. Fix bayonets. We're going hunting. Across the city, human forces that had been conducting a fighting retreat suddenly went on the offensive. Not with the cautious, defensive tactics they'd been using, but with pure aggressive fury. Tanks that had been hidden in underground parking garages roared out onto the streets. Artillery that had been carefully positioned in the ruins opened fire. Infantry that had been scattered in small groups coalesced into larger formations and charged. The Krythians had never experienced anything like it. They'd been trained to fight against species that surrendered when the situation became hopeless. They'd never faced an enemy that got more dangerous when you pushed them to the edge. They'd never encountered a species like humanity that seemed to thrive in desperate situations. The Battle of New York became the battle for New York, and the humans were winning. Not with technology or superior firepower, but with tactics refined over millennia of warfare. Ambush, encirclement, concentration of force at weak points, feigned retreats followed by devastating counterattacks. Every trick in the book, and humans had written the book on warfare. In Moscow, Russian forces executed a perfect encirclement, cutting off 3 Krythian battalions from reinforcement and systematically destroying them. In Beijing, Chinese troops used their knowledge of the ancient tunnel systems beneath the city to appear behind Krythian lines and wreak havoc. In London, British forces demonstrated the same stubborn defense that had resisted the Blitz and turned every street into a fortress. And everywhere, civilians fought alongside soldiers. Old men who'd never held a rifle in their lives suddenly became snipers. Teenage girls made IEDs from household chemicals. Children ran messages between isolated units when communications were knocked out. 8 billion humans, united for the first time in history, all fighting for the same cause, freedom. General Chen watched the reports flowing in from around the world, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. The plan was working. The Krythians were being ground down in urban warfare while their fleet was engaged by the coalition. They were losing. Slowly, painfully, but definitely losing. "Ma'am, we're getting reports from orbit," her communications officer said. "The coalition fleet is holding its own, but they're taking casualties. They need us to keep the pressure on the ground forces. If the Krythians can stabilize the situation planetside, they'll be able to turn their full attention back to the orbital battle. Then we don't let them stabilize," Chen said. "Order all forces to maintain maximum aggression. I want every Krythian soldier on this planet to understand that they're not conquerors. They're trapped, and we're going to make them pay for every second they stay on our world." The battle raged for 72 hours straight. 3 days and 3 nights of continuous combat across every major city on Earth. The Krythians threw everything they had into trying to break human resistance. They deployed battle mechs. They used chemical weapons. They even attempted to deploy tactical nuclear weapons. Before coalition ships destroyed the delivery systems, nothing worked. The humans wouldn't break. They wouldn't surrender. They wouldn't even slow down. High Admiral Vorn stood on the bridge of the Retribution's hammer, staring at casualty reports that couldn't possibly be accurate. He'd lost 40% of his ground forces. 20 of his warships had been destroyed by coalition attacks. And the humans, the primitive humans who weren't supposed to be capable of resistance, were still fighting with undiminished fury. "This is impossible," he said to himself, though everyone on the bridge heard him. "They should have broken by now. Any species should have broken by now. What's wrong with these creatures?" His tactical officer, one of the few original bridge crew still alive after 3 days of brutal combat, looked at him with something like pity. "High Admiral, I've been analyzing human communication intercepts, translating their broadcasts, reading their historical databases that we captured. I think I understand what we're facing." "Explain," Vorn demanded. "Humans have been at war for their entire existence as a sentient species. Continuous warfare. They've never known true peace. Every major advancement in their technology has been driven by military necessity. They don't view war as an aberration. They view it as their natural state. And they're very, very good at it." The tactical officer pulled up images from human history. Battlefields soaked in blood. Cities reduced to rubble. Weapons of such terrible power that even the Krythians would hesitate to use them. They've been killing each other with increasing efficiency for 10,000 years. They've studied warfare like we study art. They've made it a science. And now we've given them a common enemy. We've united them. We've done the one thing that makes humans most dangerous. We've given them a reason to work together. Vorn stared at the images, understanding dawning. The Empire had conquered 200 worlds, but never one like this. Never a death world full of apex predators who'd evolved by fighting everything. including each other. Never a species that viewed total warfare as an acceptable price for freedom. We can't win, he said slowly. Not this way. Not fighting them on the ground. No, High Admiral, agreed his tactical officer. We can't. We have two options. Withdraw and accept defeat, or commit to complete planetary sterilization. Burn the entire surface from orbit. Kill every living thing on this world and accept that we'll be fighting the coalition without the ground troops that are currently trapped planetside. It was the choice that would define the Krythian Empire's future. Withdraw and admit that humans were too dangerous to conquer, or commit genocide on a scale that would make them pariahs in the galactic community. Vorn stared at the blue planet below, at the world that had become the grave of his ambitions. Before he could give the order, alarms shrieked across the bridge. New contacts, dozens of them, jumping into the system at high speed. Identify those ships, Vorn demanded. The tactical officer's voice shook. Sir, they're coalition vessels. Reinforcements, the main coalition battle fleet. 67 capital ships. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. They're ordering us to surrender immediately or face destruction. Vorn looked at the tactical display. His fleet was battered and scattered. His ground forces were trapped in brutal urban combat. And now the full might of the coalition was bearing down on him. The choice was no longer his to make. All ships, he said heavily, defeated for the first time in his military career. Cease fire. Recall all ground forces to their transports. We're withdrawing from this system. Sir, we still have millions of troops planetside. Retrieving them under fire will be. I'm aware of the situation, Vorn snapped. But staying means losing the entire fleet. The Empire can afford to lose soldiers. We cannot afford to lose our remaining warships. Begin immediate evacuation. Leave behind anyone who can't reach the transports within 6 hours. And broadcast our surrender to the coalition. It was the most bitter moment of his life, made worse by the knowledge that the humans would be celebrating. That Earth, this backwater primitive world, had done what no other planet had managed, defeated the Krythian Empire in open warfare. Sergeant Rodriguez stood in what remained of Times Square, watching as Krythian transports lifted off in the distance, fleeing to their warships. Around him, his squad was exhausted, covered in dust and blood, but victorious. The aliens were running. Earth had won. We did it, breathed his youngest soldier, barely 18 years old. We actually did it. We beat them. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Yeah, kid, we did. Remember this moment. Remember what it cost. Remember everyone who didn't make it. Because the galaxy is going to remember too. They're going to remember that humans don't lose on our home ground. Across the city, across the world, the same scene was playing out. Human forces watching as alien troops retreated in disorder, abandoning equipment and supplies in their haste to escape. The greatest invasion fleet in Krythian history was fleeing from a species that hadn't even achieved interstellar travel yet. General Chen stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by exhausted but triumphant military leaders from every nation on Earth. The casualty reports were still coming in, and they were staggering. 20 million civilians dead, 5 million soldiers killed in action, major cities around the world reduced to ruins. The environmental damage from orbital bombardment would take decades to repair, but Earth was free. Humanity had survived, and we'd sent a message to the galaxy that would echo for millennia. Ambassador Keleth's face appeared on the screen, his mandibles clicking in what Chen had learned to recognize as admiration. General Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I formally welcome humanity as full members. Your application has been accepted. Your species has proven itself beyond any doubt. At a hell of a cost, Chen said quietly, thinking of the ruins outside. Yes, Keleth agreed, but freedom always costs. That's something humans understand better than any species in the galaxy. The Coalition is prepared to offer immediate aid, technology sharing, reconstruction assistance, and military alliance. The Krythian Empire will recover from this defeat, and when they do, they'll come back. But next time, you won't be facing them alone. Chen nodded. We appreciate the support, Ambassador, but I think the Krythians will think twice before coming back to Earth. We've made our point pretty clearly. You have indeed Keleth said, and there was something like awe in his voice. Do you know what they're calling you? The other species in the coalition? They're calling humanity the Warbringers, the species that turned their entire planet into a weapon, the species that fights to the last. It's meant as a compliment, though I'm not sure humans will take it that way. Chen smiled tiredly. We've been called worse. Let them call us whatever they want, as long as they understand that Earth is off limits, that humans don't surrender, that we'd rather die fighting than live as slaves. Oh, they understand, Keleth assured her. The entire galaxy understands now. The Krythian Empire learned the hardest lesson in the universe: never, ever underestimate a human being fighting for their home. The memorial stretched for miles across what had once been Washington, D.C., now being rebuilt from the ruins. 4,000 names from the first attack, 20 million from the invasion, each name carved in black granite, a permanent reminder of the price humanity paid for freedom. General Chen walked slowly along the wall, her hand trailing over the names. So many dead, so many sacrifices, but they hadn't died for nothing. Earth was rebuilding. The coalition was sharing technology that would advance human civilization by centuries, and the Krythian Empire had withdrawn to lick its wounds. No longer the unstoppable force it had been. They say we changed the galaxy, said a voice behind her. Chen turned to find Sergeant Rodriguez, promoted to lieutenant now, standing in his dress uniform. They say humans proved that technology isn't everything, that determination and willingness to fight matters just as much. We proved that freedom is worth fighting for, Chen corrected. That's the lesson. Not that humans are great warriors, though apparently we are. The lesson is that any species, no matter how primitive, can resist tyranny if they're willing to pay the price. Rodriguez nodded toward the memorial. Hell of a price, though. Yeah, Chen agreed. But look at what we bought with it. Look up. They both gazed at the sky, where construction was visible even in daylight. Space elevators rising from four continents. Orbital shipyards building Earth's first true warships. Combining human tactical doctrine with coalition technology. Defense platforms that would make another invasion impossible. And beyond it all, human ships preparing for their first journeys to other stars, carrying with them the message that Earth and humanity were now players on the galactic stage. We're not going to stop, are we? Rodriguez asked. Now that we know what's out there, we're going to go meet it on our terms. Chen smiled. That's the human way, Lieutenant. We don't wait for the universe to come to us. We go out and grab it. The Krythians thought they could conquer us. Instead, they gave us the stars. They showed us that we're not alone, and that the galaxy needs what humanity has to offer. What's that, Mum? What do we offer? Chen thought about that, about the brutal 72-hour battle for Earth, about the millions who'd fought and died to remain free, about the stubborn, stupid courage that had seen humanity through every crisis in its history. Hope, she finally said. We offer hope. Hope that the strong don't always win. Hope that freedom matters more than power. Hope that any species, no matter how outmatched, can resist tyranny if they're willing to fight for it. The Krythians came here to make us slaves. Instead, we showed the entire galaxy that tyranny can be defeated. That's our legacy, Lieutenant. That's what humanity offers the stars. Rodriguez saluted, and Chen returned it, standing together in front of the memorial to the dead. Above them, human ships prepared to venture into the cosmos. Behind them, the ruins of Washington rose into gleaming new towers. Around them, 8 billion humans went about their lives, forever changed by the knowledge that we weren't alone in the universe. The Krythian Empire had come to Earth believing we were primitives. They'd come seeking an easy conquest. They'd come with overwhelming force and absolute confidence in their superiority. They'd learned the hardest lesson in the galaxy: never underestimate humanity. Never underestimate a species that's been fighting for survival since we climbed down from the trees. Never underestimate the fury of humans defending their home. The alien empire had underestimated Earth, and they'd faced our final retaliation. The galaxy would never make that mistake again. General Sarah Chen addressed to the Galactic Coalition Council, 2157 far across the galaxy, in the heart of the Krythian Empire. The Emperor listened to High Admiral Vorn's report with growing cold fury. Earth had been a disaster, a humiliation, A defeat that would echo through Imperial history. Withdraw all forces from that sector. The Emperor finally commanded. Mark their system as forbidden territory. And begin preparations. Not for another invasion. For something else. If humans want to join the galactic community, if they want to be treated as equals, then we'll give them what they want. We'll treat them as a threat, as enemies worthy of our full attention. The Emperor's eyes glowed with malevolent purpose. Earth has won this battle, but the war between humanity and the Empire has only just begun. And next time, we won't underestimate them. Next time, we'll show these warbringers what a truly advanced civilization is capable of when it commits to total warfare. In the throne room's shadows, the Emperor smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator that had been wounded and was planning its revenge. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had arrived, and the universe would never be the same again. The galaxy thought it knew war. Then it met humanity. We didn't invent warfare, we perfected it. We didn't create violence, we made it an art form. And when they came to conquer us, we showed them why Earth is called a death world. Not because it's dangerous to live here, but because we made it dangerous for anyone else.